Patch 8.17, so let's just get right into it. Nunu and Willump made a video on Nunu and Willump elsewhere, so you can check that video out. I don't know what his actual numbers are at this current time, but if they're even reasonably decent, then he'll probably end up seeing some sort of play, similarly to how Olaf has seen play. And now we move on to Annie. Attack range increased. Right now, Annie doesn't really have gameplay outside of dumping all of her spells at once. Returning to her longer attack range lets her trade and harass with autos as an alternate pattern of aggression. This is actually fantastic. So what this ends up doing is it opens up Annie's support to potentially come back into the meta because the ranged auto attack poke is actually super powerful for her, and she can reliably actually harass a lot of champions out of lane. One of the changes that could have been frequent since the patch was the Doran's shield coming back due to all of the damage being changed into basically occurring periodically rather than all upfront at once. And so there was some talk about Doran's shield maybe coming back into the meta and then obviously being just a viable choice for an opening item. With bottom lane being the way that it is right now, any sort of poke is obviously going to be welcome, and the range is the most notable thing that I think most people will remember on support Annie. For mid lane Annie or top lane Annie or whatever, this is obviously going to be a really big buff still for mid and top, although Annie does not have any competitive viability in either mid or top lane, so it doesn't really matter that much for competitive. But for solo queue, this is still massive. A lot of matchups where she would have like a so-so of a hard time, or it would just be so-so. This can actually completely turn the tides because she's going to be able to weave in so many more auto attacks, and it's just going to add up to so much extra damage. Anyways, Bard. R cooldown decreased. So R tempered fade, 130 to 90 second scaling, 110 to 80 second scaling. 20 seconds off at rank 1, given that Bard is a support, so he tends to level up considerably slower. It's noticeable, but the problem is that, again, Bard's ultimate isn't something that you say to you or your teammates, hey, I have my ult up, let's try to make a play. It's noticeable, but it's not game-changing, so placebo buff. It's not gating Bard from coming back into competitive. It's not gating Bard from coming back into high MMR solo queue. There's another support champion that basically does what Bard does, but more reliably, both in competitive and in solo queue, although I still think that once the patterns get more figured out, the champion will have more problems, but obviously I'm referring to Pyke. So that's pretty much all there is to say about Bard. Fiora, E crit damage on second, and second attack increased at early ranks. Fiora's late game is pretty strong, but she could use some more dueling power in the early game. No, she doesn't, because, you know, duelists. E blade work. Crit damage on second attack, 140 to 200%, 260 to 200%. That makes absolutely no sense. Fiora is seen as an anti-tank champion, and with Riot having made assassins and other champions worse in recent patches, it obviously naturally indicates that maybe tanks could eventually see their way back into the meta. And if tanks see their way back into the meta, then obviously anti-tank champions will eventually come back into the meta. Fiora is a champion that you have to be extremely careful with any buffs and nerfs that you do to her, because she does have one of the best abilities to just get completely out of control, be so difficult to shut down. She's a champion that I wouldn't mind seeing at Worlds, but the buff to her just comes absolutely out of left field, and I don't understand why they felt obligated to buff her. We move on to Garen. Q damage decreased at later ranks. Q decisive strike. This doesn't make any sense. 30 to 170 scaling to 30 to 150 scaling. So the thing here is that you are going to be missing out on some damage now in lane. You're probably going to end up missing out on an auto attack worth of damage first recall. In the later stages of the game, it's not going to magically break Garen. He does use Decisive Strike a lot, I guess, in late game team fights, but again, this is a champion that does not have competitive viability, and so it's not really going to be seen at that much of an impact. When you think about what these damage numbers mean for super low MMR, it doesn't mean that much, because people are trading so poorly already that micro amounts of damage like this, it doesn't really often go into deciding or make or breaking a trade, because people are just so prone to constantly making mistakes, and there's so many other things that are happening inside of the game. That stuff like this, it's hard for me to understand why, and I talked about this in the last patch rundown. It's not going to do anything to him inside of solo queue. It will be felt at the higher ends of solo queue, although Garen is not really seen at the higher ends of solo queue, so then, again, I have to wonder what's going on there. Aurelia, Q bonus damage to minions increased. That's great. I know that she was picked recently. The problem is that I still think that she's not actually that good. I think that as other champions begin to slowly return to the meta and other champions begin to get buffed, I think that Aurelia, the changes that happened to her and the nerfs that she received, I still think are a little bit too much. The buff does come out of left field. Maybe it does mean that she occasionally gets picked. I know that there are still some Aurelia enthusiasts, and like I did just say, she did just get picked recently in competitive, but I don't think that she's actually in a very good spot. So I think that the Q, the Blaze Surge thing, 70% to 100%, it does actually help her out quite significantly. I do have to wonder why they're choosing to do this in this patch instead of just having done this either last patch or maybe just do it in the Worlds patch, because I don't believe 8.17 is actually the Worlds patch, so I don't know what is going on there. Kassadin, R cooldown decreased at early ranks. R Rift Walk, 6.42 seconds to 3.5 2 seconds. So this is actually really, really, really big. Kassadin right now, so Apto speculated the Fleet Footwork Kassadin change and then just going for, I think, the Roa into Seraph's Embrace. The issue with that build is that you actually don't get the CDR in it until way later on. You don't get access to the Zanya CDR, you don't get access to the Lichbane CDR, you don't want to be going Ionian boots inside of that build, so you're often missing a lot of CDR. One of Kassadin's defining characteristics is his R, and being able to basically have CDR that you wouldn't get until the later stages of the mid-game in your initial rank 1 ultimate and then obviously your rank 2 ultimate is actually super, super, super big, because he doesn't really care about the CDR on the Q or the E. It's mostly just inside of the Rift Walk, and the fact that Riot's actually giving it to him is really, really nice. So this change on Kassadin, in addition to the Annie change thus far, it looks like it's the best changes that they've given in this patch. Kayn, E duration increased early. Shadow E movement speed increased. Shadow step duration 5 to 9 second scaling to 7 to 9 second scaling. This is helpful, although I mean, it's not. This isn't what's gating Kayn. It's helpful for moving through the jungle, obviously, and then the movement speed is nice, but the problem is that Shadow Assassin is often dwarfed by Rost in almost the mass majority of cases, the higher MMR. There is some spots where you do end up taking Shadow Assassin inside of solo queue. The issue is that it honestly is just looking like Kayn is looking... I think he just needs to be reworked. I think Kayn actually just needs to rework. I think that in order to make him good, you would probably have to make him imbalanced. And then if you make him imbalanced and then try to tune him back again, I think that he ends up just going into the nothingness of the void of champions that get nerfed and then completely forgotten about and never to be picked again. So anyways, Kayn is new. I think he's about a year old. And I think it's really, really sad when a champion that's only a year old probably needs to get reworked. Because you think about Kayn, and you look at Rost, and Rost is basically the best version for competitive. He has the knock-up, he has sustain. The problem is that his numbers aren't there enough. He has to be melee. He relies on semi-expensive items, which if you're a jungler, you don't get access to semi-expensive items. Rost doesn't like to slow down. He has a reliance on CDR to a certain extent if he's going to commit inside of team fights. He has a reliance on so many other things. And when you look at Shadow, and the other thing with Kayn is obviously the transform. Not the RNG of the transform, but the randomness and being able to secure a transform. You need lane matchups to be set up certain ways. You need certain things to go in your favor. You need to get transform early enough so that you're not completely just gimped inside of the mid game. And competitive or super high-end MMR becomes increasingly more difficult to actually make things happen with Kayn. Even though he has his E, and you would think that he could just actually play around wards and that he could just jump around stuff. it sucks really bad. And so when you compound everything together with what's happening to Kayn inside of solo queue, you just end up getting this abomination that he's picked by enthusiasts, he's picked by people that like him, but I think that anyone who thinks that you can just make him magically competitively viable or actually a high-end solo queue pick just by tweaking his numbers a little bit is being dishonest with themselves. I think that his numbers would need to be tweaked dramatically, and I think that they would even probably need changes to the overall skills themselves to a certain degree. And so that's why I'm saying that this is probably a champion that actually needs a rework, because I think that in theory the champion's really, really cool. Mastery, W cooldown decreased, damage reduction increased early. Okay, this doesn't matter, this champion's terrible. Or Rengar, R cooldown decreased early, 130 to 70. This is interesting. So they're bringing Rengar's initial rank 1 ult down by 20 seconds, and Rengar is actually one of the champions that when he has his ult, he wants to go. So this is quite a big buff for Rengar's ult. I know that he's being picked sometimes, at least in Korea, in high MMR. This is very, very noticeable. Obviously, this is super, super impactful for solo queue, and then it's also a change that we felt in competitive. So this is a very welcome buff for Rengar. Varus, base health decreased, health growth increased. As a marksman with long-range poke, Varus should be easier to kill when opponents close the gap. Okay, well, you probably already know my thoughts on ADC changes and changes like this in general, so, I mean, he gets the HP back later, he's just more susceptible early on, so, I mean, he gets to bite the bullet, I guess, to a similar degree that a lot of other ADs had to experience, you know, just a few patches ago. Yorick, no one cares. Taric, adaptive damage now defaults to physical. Taric's passive means he benefits a decent amount from his basic attacks. Now defaults to physical if Taric has no bonus attack damage or ability power, okay? Items, guaranteed crit damage decreased below 30% crit, attack speed increased, and attack speed decreased. The high amount of upfront damage in the game is something we've been looking to dial back. Last patch we trimmed a lot of the burst damage from various runes. This patch we're looking at items. Well, you didn't just do it to a lot of runes. You also took damage away from champions in addition to taking damage away from runes, thus gutting them from 2 different areas at once. But anyways, Storm Razor is only seen on a few champions, and usually those champions use the Precision Tree, or they use Phase Rush, so whatever. 140% to 200% used to be 160 to 200% at 0 to 30% crit. Attack speed is up by 10%, but then you lose 5 AD. So the trade-off here is the champion that obviously doesn't like this is Draven. I think Draven would rather have the 5 AD rather than the attack speed, but then other champions that would actually make use of the attack speed maybe don't care about the attack damage loss. So I'm thinking like champions like Jinx, or I'm thinking Kai'Sa even. I think that in that regard it's all fine. So it's a weird change that I feel like they could have done last patch, and I don't know why it had to be waited until this patch in order to occur. Duskblade, proc damage decreased, lethality increased. So proc damage is down 30 to 150, it used to be 30 to 200. So when you're getting Duskblade as the first item from the jungle or something, which is often what it's going to be, if you end up building Duskblade, you don't build Duskblade super late into the game. Even on lethality based champions that are going to build Yumu's and Duskblade, you're still getting it in the mid game. You're not going to feel the 30 damage missing, so for the most part, you're probably still dealing similar damage. Lethality 18 to 21, giving it 3 lethality doesn't really matter. And the reason that I say that it doesn't matter is because most of the champions that use this Duskblade used to use sudden impact, I think. In which case, they're just getting some of their sudden impact damage back. I mean, obviously they have it all the time. It doesn't have a requirement on using a dash or a blink or whatever, but I mean, so in super extended fights, maybe you end up doing a little bit more damage, but obviously on the assassination up front, you're not going to be doing that much damage. Summoner spells, okay, bug fixes, okay, upcoming skins, Urgot, okay. These skins are actually all really cool. Now I understand why Aurelia was buffed. Dragon Fist Sin, Chromas. Okay, I'm not going to look at that. These skins are actually all really, really cool. These are some of the best skins that Riot has made in a very, very long time. So let's just recap really quick. The Annie change potentially actually puts her back into competitive as a support. And then obviously for solo queue and all the Church of Annie enthusiasts, it's super fantastic for mid and top lane. Bard change doesn't really matter. Fiora change, something they have to be very careful with. We probably will see Fiora appear sometimes at Worlds. Anyway, Garen change, everyone already knows what I think about the Garen change. Because it doesn't actually do anything at lower MMR, and I can't wait to just have the comments on my YouTube video saying, well, did you see his win rate after 2 days? Aurelia, Q damage bonus to minions increased. Okay, Kassadin, this change is massive. The Kassadin change and the Annie change are absolutely massive. The Fiora one is scary, the Aurelia one is acceptable. Yi and Yorick, no one cares about. Oh, Wukong, I didn't look at this. Now Wukong has level 1. Oh, that's his problem. I got it. Okay, Rengar. The Rengar change is actually quite big as well. So for competitive affecting changes, we have Annie, Fiora, Aurelia, Kassadin, Rengar, and that's it. Those are the only competitive changes that are going to be affected. Everything else, it's basically just solo queue, or it doesn't actually have that big of an impact on the game. So 8.17 is not the Worlds patch, so I still have hope for more changes to come, although I do believe that Riot doesn't want to do extreme changes during a Worlds patch, because that went bad one year, right? Wasn't that the Mordekaiser year or something? So I don't know. Maybe the patch and everything that we're seeing happening towards the end of playoffs for all the major regions and the way that solo queue is shaping up right now is going to be indicative of what the meta is likely to look like. With that being said, it seems like bottom lane and everything is shaping up actually kind of fine. Jungle should shape up fine. Top lane is likely going to be mixed up a little bit more, and then mid lane is obviously going to be mixed up a little bit more. So that's pretty much it.